So today I'm feeling like top mojo, and I decided to go with the videos ideas for Zenless Zone Zero, like top 10 NPCs, top 10 bakeries, and maybe top 10 pussies, like this white pussies, black pussies, and this orange fat pussies. Are there any way that I could turn into this cat? So basically, I would rate the characters with two categories. Like one is the power levels, the amounts of DPS and the amounts of buff that it could potentially brute force the stage. And of course, the team flexibility. And the max score is gonna be 5 out of 5. But the final score wouldn't necessarily reflect my recommendation in order because of some reason that I would explain along with the video. So let's go. The number 10 is Caesar King. Even though she's a girl though, her power levels is actually kind of mid. Even Nicole and Lucy are pretty good substitute to her, and there's this one downside with her buff is that it only applies to the on-field characters, which is 1000 of attacks. But her shield is definitely one of a kind, and she could literally fit in pretty much any team in the game. It's almost like you're pulling her for the unlimited tower, because she's really isn't that good when you are playing against the enemy that couldn't one-shot you, whether it's in Deadly Assault, even more so in Shield defense. But her team flexibility is also indisputable. You would get a good result in pretty much all the team, but she will never be the best in slot, and that's why she's ranked at number 10. But Caesar's shield is actually pretty good with the characters like Anby, Soldier 11, or even Aveline, who could get hit while they are dishing out DPS. So number 9, Bernice. Bernice is also extremely flexible in terms of team comp. Her role of being a supportive anomaly is also like really high, cause she could deal a lot of builds up when she's off field. When she's paired with Miyabi, she's actually very close behind to Yanagi. In terms of power levels, if we are talking about the Bernice and Vivian without the signature, Bernice is actually better. But in the other side, not only that Vivian with her signature is better than Bernice with signature, Vivian's synergy with Piper and Jane Doe makes her better than Bernice in general. We also have a loss of boss with Ice and Ether weakness, and that somehow makes Bernice in a really hard position to use with Miyabi, or even clearing the stage in general. She's still really good in a lot of team, but Vivian would be better in most of those teams. But there's one thing that makes Bernice better than Vivian is that she is very simple to use. All you have to do is just tap and hold the skill until you get enough builds up, while Vivian has to do a lot of maneuvers to get the most out of her kit. So overall, I think she's at number 9. And I really don't want to put her here because she's my favorite characters in the Zenless Zone Zeros. And next is Yanagi. I think Yanagi is actually really good. She could go hog wild and be an on-field DPS with the Thunder Metal Force set if the enemy is electric weakness, but if not, she could also do it with the Chaos Jazz Force set. And she could also take the supportive role perfectly. Like most of the speedrun in the Miyabi Yanagi team, Yanagi would be on the Freedom Blue Force set to proc the disorder as much as possible from Miyabi. She might not be the most flexible in terms of team comp, but she's the most flexible in terms of her role. Yanagi Vivian team also works really well, which she could trigger more a bloom that way, while Jane Doe has to rely on her build sub. So overall, a pretty recommendable characters. Trigger is also in this really weird position just like Caesar, where she could fit in pretty much every single team. But the differences with Caesar is that she actually have the best in slot team, like when you pair Trigger with Anby and Trigger with Yanagi. So if you don't have Soldier Zero Anby or Yanagi, I wouldn't recommend you to get Trigger, because I do think that in the future of Zenless Zone Zero, the specialist like Glider is probably gonna be more valuable than a generalist like Trigger. So next, let's moving on to Vivian. So Vivian is basically Bernice but in Ether element in terms of her role, and she does has better synergy with Piper and Jane Doe as compared to Bernice Jane Doe and Bernice Piper because of how her kit works, which a Bloom has much higher multiplier to the physical and ice more than any other element. Anyway, she's also very flexible. As long as you pair her with another anomaly, she will be performing at the high levels. The recommended team would be Vivian Jane Doe, Vivian Piper, Vivian Miyabi, and Vivian Yanagi. Vivian Yanagi is actually performing better than Vivian Jane Doe because Yanagi could use her skill rapidly And number 5, Nicole. I think lots of people do agree that she kind of deserved this position, cause there are just simply too many things that she could do, cause her kit are just simply too powerful, which is 40% debuff, and you could also turn her into a supportive anomaly, like when you are pairing with Miyabi Astra or the Zhuyuan Qingyi team to proc the 4 set, and her additional ability doesn't really matter that much, so you could basically put her on any team with DPS, and she would be shredding every bit of defense down. The only downside about Nicole is that cause you gotta swap in and out a lot, because her debuff would only last 3.5 seconds after the last hit of ether damage. And next, number 4, Lider. So on his release, he's actually a pretty niche character that he could only pair with Alan and Soldier 11. But then Zenless Zone 0 just kept rolling out the Fire DPS and the Ice DPS, making this supposedly a niche character into a fairly versatile character. But his power levels is also indisputable in his own niches, which is gonna give gigantic amounts of fire and ice damage. And you're gonna pair him with DPS like Evelyn, Hugo, and Alan. It's pretty hard for me to imagine that he's gonna get power creep pretty soon for a specialist like this. And surprisingly, he could also be used as a DPS. He could even outperform Soldier 11 if you're using Infernal Force set along with the Bernice Astra. But the number 6 pieces should remain at impacts because that's also his sources of damage, and these are the recommended team. The Lider Evelyn Astra team is still the strongest team in the entire game aside from the Miyabi team. And of course, Lider Lycon Hugo, Lider Astra Alan Joe. I'm pretty excited with the Alan Joe, by the way. I wonder how much improvement she would get. So number 3, Evelyn. So basically I put her here for an obvious reason. She's the strongest DPS aside from Miyabi in this patch. The amounts of DPS that she could dish off is so high that even with her signature weapon and without the Lider, fighting the fire resistant enemy in this Typhoon Destroyer, she could get over 50,000 score. With this Astra Nicole team, she has the highest brute force potential than any characters in the game, except Miyabi. Her only weakness is her flexibility of team comp. You better have one of these characters when you are playing Evelyn, which is Astra, Lider, Jufufu, and Trigger is actually fine with her. And to be totally honest, I think most of you would have one of these stunner or support, or if you have planned to pull for Jufufu, and that's why I put her up here. And the other reason is that she's a critical oriented DPS. It means that even without the weakness, she would also perform fairly well. Unlike the disorder oriented characters, it would hinder more than about 30 to 40% of DPS. Anyway, as long as you have the right teammate, she's gonna be the second best DPS in the entire game. And make sure that you don't get diabetes for playing her, because she's gonna keep shoving cakes onto your face every time you use chain attacks. And now we are getting into the Void Hunter territory. The Hoshimi Miyabi. Anyone that I've mentioned previously ain't even the same league as Miyabi. Not only that Miyabi has crazy amounts of stat, basically a stat powerhouse, she's also easy to play and very long invincibility as a DPS. She's so much better than any Ice DPS out there. She could also fit herself in a lot of teams. But one thing you want to pay attention when you are playing Miyabi is that you don't want to quick swap too quickly before the anomaly is proxed, because swapping before the anomaly is proxed would stop it from being triggered. So what I usually do is basic 3-4-5 and prox the anomaly first before I use the hold attacks, so that I wouldn't waste the anomaly builds up. The only huge downside of Miyabi is that she kind of needs her signature weapon. I learned it the hard way because I didn't pull for her signature. Just make sure that you get it. The generally strongest team would be Miyabi, Yanagi, Astra. And if you have Miyabi with Mindscape 0 with her signature, it's actually better to invest on Yanagi and Yanagi's signature before you invest the Mindscape 1, so that Yanagi would have enough builds up to catch up with Miyabi's disorder. And of course, Miyabi's Sokaku Lycon team for the ice weakness enemy. And if you happen to have Lider's signature, you could also use it on Lycon, so that you could get massive amounts of buff from the Lider's signature. And of course, Miyabi Vivi and Astra, Miyabi Nicole Astra also works surprisingly well. I even made videos about it. And Miyabi Lucy Piper is also really good as a free-to-play team. So next, move on to number 1, Nekomata. I mean, it's Astra. And I don't remember I see any Void Hunter mark on Astra. I thought she's just a professional singer. She got the craziest amounts of buff. And there's this other thing that people doesn't really talk about is that her on-field time is extremely low. And that would subsequently increase your DPS, cause your DPS gonna get more on-field time and also more energy builds up and ultimates builds up. And she could fit in pretty much any team in the entire game. And on top of that, she doesn't even need her signature. And her Mindscape Zero also do everything that she need to. For any team in the entire game, having her on the team would feel totally different because of the sheer amounts of buff is just gigantic. I don't have much to talk about her, but I do think that she is the most cool characters in the Zenless Zone Zero because she allow you to play anyone that you want. Even Nekomata would be on steroid when you're pairing with her. So I don't really expect my ranking turns out this way. I mean, like, especially the Evelyn Lighter, because if I put team flexibility into the account, they wouldn't be so high up on the list. But I still decide to put them this high anyway, because when you could have just brute forced the content with Evelyn Lighter, then there's no point of being flexible. And I do think in the future of the Zenless Zone Zero, if they weren't another generalist support like Astra Yao that is so OP, I think the specialist support like the Lighter would be doing much better in the meta. Tell me what you think, whether you agree or disagree, cause it could be just me. And I think it would be fun to see all the opinions. And yeah, I think that's about it. See ya, guys.